Welcome to this discussion on adjusting through transitions and ways to enhance coping. Oftentimes, I hear our clients saying, I really feel stuck or I feel paralyzed, and I'm not able to take that action, or I'm struggling with trying to make those shifts. How can we pivot, more in the opposite direction?
That's a great question. That's something that as humans we struggle with a lot. A coping skill for that I would recommend is called opposite action to emotion. So it's used to help get unstuck from these ineffective behaviors that arise from certain emotional states. We get stuck in difficult emotional states partly due to mood congruent behaviors. We fall into these behavior patterns that really work to keep these difficult emotions around. For example, when we're feeling depressed, we tend to isolate, be inactive, ruminate on negative thoughts, and so forth, which will all just work to increase our depression and keep it hanging around. So the goal for opposite action to emotion is first to increase our awareness and insight into our emotions, identify the opposite end of the spectrum that we want to be on, and then engage in actions to get unstuck.
Absolutely, Emily, this is really fantastic and something that I'm now going to use with our clients, because oftentimes when our clients feel stuck, they can only think in a very narrow focus, right? Like what they are experiencing is so real that it's very difficult for them to think of that opposing action or that opposite emotion. With our one-on-one nutrition clients, we often discuss, ways to cope and transitions and adjustments in healthy ways that don't involve abuse or misuse of foods or beverages, because there are long-term effects to that usually lead people to seek out our help, and that's when they start working with us. But we want to create that awareness around their eating habits and how they aren't serving their bodies to reach their optimal goals. And I'd love to dive a little bit deeper really into some of these strategies that you both use with individuals who use food or alcohol to cope with their stress.
Well, I like to think a lot about the long-term effects when it comes to overeating and how we tackle that piece. I think an important place to start is looking at the fact that overeating in the long term can increase our risk for the development of different diseases. So we think of, heart disease, think of obesity, diabetes, stroke.
Yeah, and even just going back to the emotional the emotional triggers that are tied with that too. When we start to disassociate from our bodies or start to feel like things are changing, or we're starting to see the impact of how it's impacting our health, we often start to have an identity crisis. I am now this unhealthy person. I now can no longer move my body as efficiently or effectively as I used to. I now can't run after my grandchildren. So there's definitely those long-term impacts, and yes, overall affecting our health for the long term.
I mean, in addition to that increased risk for developing disease, we think about, overeating can disrupt hunger regulation. So eating foods high in inflammatory or processed fats, salt, or sugar, that releases this feel-good hormone like dopamine, and then that activates the pleasure centers in your brain. So you could see how food could be interacting with the brain. It could be addictive. It's comforting. I want to grab for that food. Over time, our body can associate these pleasure sensations with certain foods, which tend to be high in inflammatory fats and calories. This process may eventually override hunger regulation, encouraging you to eat for pleasure rather than hunger. Disruption of these hormones may trigger a perpetual cycle of overeating. Now, in addition to the disruption of hunger regulation, there can be an impact on brain function. So, this could impact, our ability to process, and it could have an impact on our memory as well. People may even feel sluggish or fatigued because of a drop in blood sugar after overeating. So you really have to pay attention to how your body and mind are both feeling. Really all goes hand in hand.
Absolutely. And we see this a lot with our new clients who have not yet established that healthy relationship with food, who are chronic dieters and are in constant dissatisfaction with the state of their body. And we also, have several people who use alcohol to cope with their stressors, and in a very numbing way that doesn't lead to progress or progression, but often leads them numb or exactly stuck where they are. So, but shedding light on some of their habits often shocks these individuals. Even in this scenario too, Emily, when you were discussing before about basically identifying what your emotions are and what you're experiencing, and then the other emotions you want to have, instead of going down that numbing path or finding it as a crutch and using alcohol, it leads us back. What was that coping strategy, or what you mentioned before is where we were talking about pivoting? What was the term you used?
Opposite action to emotions. We want to focus on the actions we can control that will promote the emotion opposite of what we're feeling.
Yes. So opposite of what maybe is leading you to drink to excess, and identifying it first in that moment, recognizing there's an issue really is the first step in making a change and seeking help. And that's where we often have that conversation with, I'm sure, people that come in to see you guys and people that are coming to us as well. But sometimes when we have a nutrition client that recognizes there's an issue, or they have been misusing food or alcohol for years, at times they can't really articulate exactly what they want or how they feel and what success looks like for them on their journey. And this is something we often talk about as the fear of success, the fear of taking shape into something different, identifying yourself in a different light and changing identities. Can you guys highlight, maybe why would someone feel afraid or fearful of reaching their health goals or succeeding or taking control of their life?
Ashley, you presented that whole idea of fear of success to me last week. And I'm like, wait, fear of success, not fear of failure. I had to take a step back and actually think about it some. But, I wanted to delve into okay, well, why would somebody have that fear of success? So, through further reflection, I came up with some bullet points. So we could be avoiding it because we are avoiding backlash or a negative reaction. That negative reaction can be so uncomfortable that we just want to avoid success altogether. We might be wondering, can we live up to others' expectations? What if they don't think we deserve this? What if my friend thinks I don't deserve the A that I got on this paper, even though I worked really hard for it? And we could also think about the fear of success going back to our childhood. So if as a child you were belittled for success or scolded, you learn to avoid success rather than face negativity altogether. And so then you're probably like, okay, well, now what? How do I even begin to overcome this fear? So we would be exploring the origin of it. Like, where does it even come from? What are your past experiences with success? Think about earlier successes and what happened as a result. So thinking back to, childhood, college, whenever in your life, we would want to pay attention to, well, how does that manifest? Like, how does that fear show itself? What are some ways you've been sabotaging your path to success? And if you identify the behaviors, you can begin to counteract them. Now, in addition to those 2 points, we want to visualize success. Think about, what does it mean to you? What are the potential positives and negatives? Imagine achieving that goal, what may happen as a result, and different ways you might deal with it. Think about how it's going to feel to achieve that goal. And then another way of overcoming the fear of success, we want to look at managing stress and anxiety. So stress and anxiety may be contributing to these fears that we're having, and practicing self-care and any of those healthy coping mechanisms, which we discussed earlier, can be helpful in managing these feelings.
Absolutely. I mean, this discussion today, ladies, and just looking at the takeaways from all the different topics, from transitioning and adjusting to coping mechanisms, to identifying the difference between healthy and unhealthy coping styles and what that looks like, and the method of pivoting your thoughts and adjusting what the current state is that you're in right now, and where you want to be and how you want to feel. I feel like there were so many amazing things that you can take away from today, and we'd love to hear from you. If you made it to the end of our discussion today, we want to know your thoughts on, can you relate to any of these topics that we talked about? Are you realizing that you have been stuck in inaction and you need help pivoting and moving forward towards that healthier version of you? You can find these two lovely ladies over at Consider Yourself Counseling, located in St. Charles, Illinois, as they work with their clients in person as well as virtually, so from anywhere. And I definitely appreciate your insight in this topic today, ladies. Look forward to future collaborations with your team and outstanding counselors. Thank you so much for both being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Okay, well, everybody have a great rest of your day. And don't forget to share with us your feedback and what you'd like to see more of in the future. Have a great day.